Tonight I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about B.F. Skinner, a very influential thinker in especially learning and behaviorism, along with John Watson, probably considered one of the founders of the school of thought. Born March 20th, 1904, died August 18th, 1990. He was an American psychologist, behaviorist, social philosopher. He taught at Harvard University from 1948 until his retirement in 1974. Was a prolific author, published 21 books and 180 articles. Probably his biggest contribution is operant conditioning. If you've ever had a student with ABA hours that worked with an RBT, if you've ever heard the term positive reinforcement, that's directly attributable to Skinner. I think as his primary contribution was operant conditioning, I'm going to briefly go over the basics of operant conditioning and its relevancy to the classroom. So, the basis of operant conditioning is a behavior can either be rewarded or punished. Anything that increases the likelihood of a behavior reoccurring is a reinforcement, and anything that decreases the chance of a behavior reoccurring is a punishment. So you've probably heard the term positive reinforcement. There's also negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement would be anything that you add to a situation or give to an individual to increase the occurrence of a behavior. So say you want one of your students to remain seated. So if your student remains seated for 1 minute, you may give them verbal praise or a pat on the back. You can also negatively reinforce something. A negative reinforcement would be, same example, you want your student to stay in their seat. If your student remains seated for the allotted amount of time, you may take away an obligation they had to do. So maybe a student's chore is taking the trash out or cleaning the chalkboard and they don't like to do it. You can say, if you stay in your seat for X amount of time, you don't have to do this thing. So you're removing something from the situation. That would be a negative reinforcement. Same thing with punishment. You have positive punishment and negative punishment. A positive punishment would be adding an aversive stimuli to decrease the occurrence of behavior. And a negative punishment would be taking away something that an individual enjoys or likes if they exhibit a behavior that is not desirable. It's important to remember that these do not have to be intentional, and it is anything that increases or decreases the likelihood of a behavior reoccurring. Even if you intend for it to be reinforcing, it may be punishing. If you have a student that's aversive to physical touch and you pat them on the back as a reward for a behavior you want to reoccur, you've just punished that student. If they say, I stay in my seat and I'm going to get a pat on the back and I don't like being touched, well, they're not going to stay in their seat because then you touch them. That's the gist of operant conditioning. It gets way more complicated than that, but for the purposes of this video, we'll stop there. Some critiques of Skinner's version of behaviorism. Probably the biggest one is that he did not recognize internal stimuli. He only focused on what was observable and measurable, So a student's thoughts, feelings, cognition, anything internal that couldn't be measured, he pretty much just ignored. Even going so far as what he coined, or was coined for him, radical behaviorism. That internal stimuli is not real, or internal stimuli are the direct result of external stimuli, that they're prompted and created by the environment. That's probably the biggest criticism of Skinner. He actually spent most of his speech for his Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Psychological Association railing against the movement toward cognitive psychology. Personally, I have pretty much the same criticism, that students can be internally motivated. People have their own intrinsic motivations. But yeah, I just can't overstate how influential he is to modern teaching. I use the principles that Skinner developed every day. So, thanks for listening.